Okay, welcome to the Texas A&M College of Education and Human Development REO Office Workshop Series. This particular installation is involving, we've invited our representative from the Texas A&M IRB Office to kind of go over what it takes to submit to them and how the process works. They did get a new or implement a new submission system December of last year. So it's been going for a little bit. So this is a good opportunity now that hopefully they've worked out some of the kinks and are able to kind of show you the ins and outs, as well as take any questions that you have about kind of the overall processes and what's needed here and there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Denise Puga. Her name is on the screen. I've changed my name to her name to present on all things IRB. So thank you, Denise.
I don't know if that caught. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate you. Okay, so I'm going to give everybody a chance right now if they maybe have already seen this presentation. What was it, 2 years ago you said, Corey? It couldn't have been 2 years. It's less than 2 years because we started in December. And it was to introduce you to how to use Huron. So if you are like, I know how to use Huron, I've been there. I would love to take a pause and give you a chance to ask any questions you might have, but I know people tend to be shy when they're on Zoom and they don't actually speak up. But if you want to right now and unmute yourself and ask any questions related to Huron that maybe you've already used it and you just kind of want a quick question before you exit because you've seen this before, I'd love to give you that opportunity. Any takers? No? Yeah, that tends to be the case. Okay. Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, I have well, something I hope you cover. Most of our projects involve grants for other universities or locations. And so that's been kind of tricky learning that process. So I hope you cover that.
Okay. Hi, Gail. I'm Denise. I remember we worked a little bit.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that might be a little bit outside the scope of this presentation, but if you
Okay.
want to schedule a time with me, we can do some more work on that because do you have any incoming funding that is awaiting or just with your current protocols you've recently been working on?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Well, please email me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you related to anything new that's coming in or your current ones if you need to update something. It's just that's a little more involved and usually we like to help our investigators one-on-one with that.
Yes, and you've helped us a great deal already.
Great.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a great question. So some of you are in a situation where maybe you're working with collaborators outside of A&M, or maybe you have funding that's coming in from another institution because we're the subawards related to that grant, or even sometimes maybe we are the primary and we're having a subaward with another institution. If you ever find yourself in that camp, please reach out to our office and we are happy to help you set up that protocol correctly so that it can move forward without any issues. Sometimes it's really important to identify who's going to be the IRB of record for these multi-site or collaborative projects. And so sometimes we can serve as the IRB of record and sometimes we cannot, depending on whether your study is exempt, expedited, who the funder is, whether or not it's funded. There has to be a conversation as to how to move that protocol forward. If it's exempt research, it's likely that each institution is going to have to find their own IRB approval, like each person involved in the project will have to do their own IRB approval. If it's an expedited protocol where maybe A&M is the IRB of record, we're most likely going to be the IRB of record. And if money's coming in from another institution, it might be the case that we have to rely on that other institution, just depending on the funding. So there's a lot of things that go into it. I mean, I just quickly mentioned a lot of factors. And so I just want to bring that up. Make sure you call us, contact us. Don't just assume who's going to be the IRB of record because you might be surprised and find out down the road that it's not that case. And usually if you don't have the right paperwork, it might actually interfere with your ability to get your money. So it's important to have those conversations early on. Is there anybody else that has any questions I can touch up before I get going on? Hey, this is what Huron does. No? Okay, perfect. So I am going to try to share my screen here really quickly. It's not my computer. Corey was nice enough to let me borrow it, so let me familiarize myself with it real quick. I love to start with this Google page because I always try to tell people how to get to our website the quickest they can. And I always say Google is your best friend for this. And just Google TAMU IRB. Those are two words that you're likely to remember very quickly. In the very first place, you'll end up. Yes.
So just real quick for the Zoom people, if you have a comment or question and you don't want to interrupt, you can put it in the chat, and we do have someone who is monitoring the chat and will be able to ask that question in a good moment. So if you don't want to interrupt, just put something in the chat. I forgot to.
Oh, great. Thanks, Corey. But also feel free to interrupt. I really like interacting with the audience. It helps. But I know that people are polite and don't want to interrupt, but really do so, because that way, if you're having that question, I know maybe somebody else in the audience is having that same question, and you're really helping the group out. And it's a small group. There's what, 10 of us, 12 of us? Okay, well, there's 28 of you, but it's a relatively small group, and you're all colleagues. So please just imagine we're all in this big room together, and just ask your question and we'll move forward, okay? So I hope this is big enough. I think I can make it a little bigger so we can all be. The Human Research Protection Program is basically what employs me, and I am one of the coordinators that, in this case, is responsible for the education outreach coordination, but I do also manage some IRB protocols, and some of you have worked with me as a result of that, because I have been working in the office for 10 years. Corey and I started at the same time, but then he left us, but you know, we still speak kindly of him, even though he straight up left us. So if you click on the Human Research Protection Program, you will find a ton of resources that will help you through your process. And I'm actually going to reduce this. I don't think we need to look at it. And I can't express how important it is for you to visit the website. So we take a lot of pride in our website. A lot of people have used us as a tool to say, like, hey, those people, or reference, like, hey, they really do have their website together. I'm sorry, my team. Do you want to close Teams? Where are you, Corey?
Let's go down to the.
I don't know what your computer does. Oh,
well, maybe it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It should just.
Sometimes it pop up even if you have closed. I think that's kind of.
I thought I closed it already.
Yeah, that happens sometimes to me as well. Anyways, our website does have a lot of the information you will need to move you forward in this process. You'll be able to find anything that is related or important for you to be aware of. So we do have this scrolling images that if you click on them, they'll provide you with important information, like where is Huron, commonly asked questions that a lot of investigators have addressed us. So you can just look on there, frequently asked questions. There's this wonderful opportunity up that maybe you are not aware of, because we are not getting enough submissions, but this is a great plug-in opportunity. So the Aggie Research Volunteer Recruitment website is not quite up yet, but they're trying to get enough interest in it to put it up here in the near future. So if you are trying to find another resource to recruit participants to your study, this is intended for that, and it'll be available. I want to say like maybe in the next couple of months or 2 months, and all you have to do is submit a modification to your existing protocol, or if you haven't yet submitted a protocol to be reviewed, just make sure you click on this link and it'll walk you through the instructions, and it's another opportunity for you to recruit participants. Does somebody have a question or just random? Nope. Okay. The click submit campaign that we started, a lot of people forget to click submit on their protocols, and so they sit on your site. We'll go over that, but keep that in mind. Don't forget to click, and we try to make buttons, but they wouldn't support that. It's a problem. So guys, don't forget to click submit if you don't remember anything else about this presentation. The other thing I want to point out is that we have our toolkit where you have access to your templates. So In IRIS, many of you might be familiar with IRIS. You used to have to fill out a long online application that a lot of investigators didn't really enjoy filling out. Now what you do is you fill out in Huron a very small IRB application, but most of your descriptions and everything related to your study, it can actually be found on your IRB protocol, which is a Word template that you download from our website, and that's where you write to us what it is that you're going to do. I think a lot of investigators really enjoy this because Word is just such a easier way to write down your procedures. And also when you submit it to us, we're actually able to use track changes and comments to let you know what changes you need to do. And that's mostly how you're all used to collaborating with each other. So it kind of borrows the same idea. And a lot of our investigators find this to be a really useful resource. The other way I know that our investigators really like Huron, other than from what we've been hearing from them, is how much more they're submitting. We are getting a ton of submissions, and I think it's just so much easier for investigators to use this resource. So I just wanted first to point out where the templates are. So here you have that toolkit, and then once you click on it, it'll take you to templates. And this is where you'll find all your templates that you would need as you're putting your protocols together. And I think I can make it a little bigger. So you have them for biomedical research, you have for social behavioral and exempt research. If you're not sure what type of research you are doing, social behavioral is usually a pretty good template for you to get started. We have one with instructions and one without instructions. The one with instructions really tells you what kind of information you need to put in each of those pages. We have one for if you're just trying to find out if your research is human subject research or not. If all you're doing is analyzing secondary data or record specimens, we have a protocol for that. So I'm just going to click on the social behavioral template with instructions to just kind of give you an idea if you haven't seen it already or what it looks like. And then hopefully, can you see it, Corey? Is it up? Yeah.
You're using my.
Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah, you didn't share the screen. You didn't share the whole screen.
You didn't share it. Share.
Yeah.
Okay. So you should be able to now see the whole protocol. Perfect. So you will be able to see all this red font that basically tells you what information you need to put and plug into these sections. It'll walk you through what you're not used to putting in the IRB application, but without so much redundancy. You'll see the purpose of the study, your background and rationale. Then you'll tell us what your inclusion/exclusion criteria are. And again, that red font will walk you through, hey, this is the kind of information we're looking in these specific sections. So I think that's very useful for our investigators. You also have what procedures you'll be conducting as part of your research, and you just type this up. You let us know what you're doing, how you're recruiting, how you're consenting, how are you documenting consent, and that's your protocol. Your protocol is your #1 most important document you will develop. It is how you let the world know what it is that you're doing. Because we are here and I am here to give you tips of how to be successful. One of the things I always tell investigators is when you're putting your protocol together, anyone should be able to pick it up and replicate your findings without having to email you or ask you what it is that you did for every single procedure. I think a lot of investigators are so comfortable with the procedures that they have designed that they skip some important steps. Like, yes, I will be recruiting participants, and that's a sentence. You need to tell us where you're going to be recruiting those participants. What does that recruitment material look like? Who are the people you're trying to recruit? And so again, the best advice I can give you is that anyone should be able to pick up your protocol and replicate your exact study without ever having to contact you with a follow-up email or a call or anything, right? So that's something you want to do as you're putting your protocols together. If you have a collaborator, you might want to share your protocol with them and see if they are on the same page as to what are the procedures you're doing. And if you both agree that that's the same things you're doing. Does anyone have any questions about protocol development, or have you seen it, used it, have any feedback you'd like to provide at this point? No? Okay. So that's your protocol. You also have templates for your consent documents. We have one for surveys. A lot of investigators, all they do is survey research, and so you have a survey consent template that we have available. We have one for parents. So if you ever do research with minors, as you know, you need to collect permission from the parents. And we have a parental permission form as well as an assent form. So if you're working with children, they too have to participate as far as they can based on their age and ability in the assent process, which is you explaining to them what they are going to undergo in simple terms that they can understand. And we do have forms and scripts that we provide based on age. We also have a guidance document that you can find on our website that will further walk you through the assent process and the consent process. So, yes, Corey?
I know there is, and I was recently working with an investigator on this. I don't know how much you can speak to it, but there's another, like if I'm working with children in research, not only is there IRB, there's this other office that
Yes,
you have to interface with as well. Can you speak to that?
Yes, that's a great question. Okay. So our office is tasked with making sure that human subject research is compliant with the common rule. But there are other compliance offices that we work together to make sure that the rights of those participants are upheld. And one of those offices is the University Youth Program. And so where they come in is making sure that all investigators that are interacting with children one-on-one have proper training of how to interact with that child, what safety precautions need to be in place to safeguard the safety of that child. That office is obviously not our office, as Corey just indicated. And one of the things we do is called the ancillary review. Many of you, if you've submitted to IRB, you might have found that your protocol had an ancillary review assignment, which could have been to the department head because the department head has to sign off. It might have been to IT. For example, if you're using a cloud-based service and it's not approved, it might end up in IT, and IT might contact you with additional questions to make sure it's okay. University Youths Program is another one that will contact you, make sure you have all the training you need to have. We have the privacy officer if you're ever working with HIPAA and specimens, or you're having data coming in from other places that might be from a covered entity. You have the privacy officer step in for those kind of situations. And the registrar's office is the other ancillary review that we often see. There's other ones, there's other compliance offices, but those are the ones that are most likely to affect the research that you are doing. The registrar's office need to make sure that if you are a professor who wants to use the data that you are collecting from your students, that you're doing it in a manner that is FERPA compliant. Just because you are the instructor of record does not mean you can use the research, the data for research purposes. You have to ask permission from the student in order to use the data, or there's other ways that the registrar's office can help you make sure you're using that data in an appropriate manner. And so that's something that a lot of our investigators is becoming more transparent in Huron when those protocols are being routed to other offices. And I think that's why it feels like such a new process for many of our investigators, and we've had a lot of questions through our office, is that it feels like it's brand new. But it's not entirely new, it's just that Huron is a lot more transparent about these additional compliance offices. Yes, Corey?
So, because we have a lot of researchers that are interacting with children in public schools and so on and so on, right? It's not that you do it. That is what happens. I'm telling you, don't look at a deficit. Like, if I don't do this, it won't happen. I'm saying your best chance at this happening is for you to be a deal if you want to go to an one. The best opportunity.
Okay, thanks.
So if you receive a application that is going to recruit and enroll participants in schools, and there's research going to be done off campus, does that office still get involved? The youth programs office? Yes,
because you're an agent of A&M. And so that's what they're trying to mitigate. Any how do I say this?
Well, I'm just,
yes, go ahead.
My question is more like just as far as time to approve. So there's going to be, I need to consider that a little bit as far as it's going to take a little bit more time.
Yes.
Because there's more review steps than just what's happening inside the office.
Correct. Yes. Yes. There are often other steps outside of ours. Yes.
You can answer this.
No, that was pretty much, there are other offices that look at the protocols, and other offices help us ensure that we are protecting participants. For example, a lot of people don't think about the data and how you store that data and what happens to that data, but that is part of the protection of people. Like, you don't want your private data being shared with the wrong people. And so that's part of protecting participants. It's not just the consent process, it's not just the collection of the data, but then what happens afterwards, what happens during the interaction with those, in this case, children. So if
we have a question in the chat. If we are conducting research in foreign countries with documents in a foreign language, can we have the version in English approved first and then submit the translation?
Some investigators do that. You just want to make sure you make that clear in your protocol, or it's very likely your coordinator is going to kick it back and say, let me have those translated versions. And I understand why, because it does take some work to get those documents translated. And then anytime there's a modification, you might have to do it. So just make sure you're very transparent in your protocol and indicate, once I get approval, I will then submit a modification with the translated documents. And also let me see if it's right here, the translation certificate. So anytime that you are translating documents to a non-English language, we do ask that you use this translation certificate that basically indicates that yes, this document has been properly translated, because unfortunately we don't have staff that speak every language. I wish I spoke every language, but unfortunately I don't. And so we do need some documentation of that. And if you are working with international international participants, here's another great ancillary review. You might have to deal with expert control. And so we always, anytime that you say you're doing research outside of the United States, we route it to expert control to make sure that there are no issues with that research being carried out, or the people you are interacting with in that other country or institutions outside of the United States. So. Okay, so this is where you can find all your templates that you will be attaching to your protocol, and then to IRB application, and of course, okay. The other thing that I maybe want to show you is the Huron Knowledge Center. So why is it gone? There we go. So right on, again, you have the toolkit. That's where you find your templates, but you also have the Huron Knowledge Center. So one of the things that, unfortunately for IRIS, we were not able to provide the service where we actually have the ability to create PowerPoints and walk you through the process. IRIS had a lot of rules and regulations, a lot of rules about what we could share, images and screening of their product with our investigators, but Huron doesn't have that. And so what we were able to do is basically do screenshots of the applications and walk you through how to do any of the things that most of our investigators would need to do. There's one that gives you just a navigation of how the Huron works. So you can always just go around and look through it and see what capabilities there are. Some of you got approved in IRIS, and that application got moved to Huron, and you have to submit an initial modification to finish populating the IRB application. I think some of you, at least in attendance, must have found yourself in this boat. And if you want to speak to it, that's great as to what your experience is. I think it's been a little painful for investigators, but we do have a PowerPoint presentation that walks you through that process and how to submit that first modification, and also how to submit your annual review, which is your continuing review, or your administrative check-in. You have a PowerPoint presentation for how to submit your initial IRB application in Huron. So some of you have never submitted in Huron. And so if you download that PowerPoint presentation, I'm just going to open very quickly. It literally step by step, it'll show you a screenshot of every page and what information needs to be added there, what personnel you need to add, your study scope, every page that you see in the application, it'll walk you through what information needs to be provided for that. So that I find has been a pretty good resource for our investigators. If you ever have a funding opportunity and you need a letter from us, like a delayed onset or a 118 determination, we have a PowerPoint presentation that walks you through how to submit for those. Those are fairly quick, and there's a template that you also have to use for that. And then if you ever just want to know if it's human subject research or not, we have PowerPoint presentation for that. As any of you that have ever submitted to the IRB, you know there's usually some back and forth. You submit it, and then you get some more information back from us that, hey, we need this additional information or this additional change. And knowing how to respond to those in Huron is new. So we did develop a PowerPoint presentation for that you can use. So it'll walk you through how to make those edits. I find that most investigators have no problem responding to changes in Huron. So their turnaround, investigators' turnaround is a lot quicker. Investigators, I think, used to hold on to applications longer because IRIS was so difficult to figure out, but Huron seems to be like that. You know, you send out the request for changes and it's back within a day. So that's great. We're happy that people are enjoying the product. And then we have, once you've gotten that approval, you need to make any changes, any modifications, any personnel change requests. If anything ever happens that is out of the ordinary, you need to report it to us. Any anticipated problems associated with your research, we have a form for that. And then, of course, your annual reviews, depending on the type of research you do, you either do an admin check-in or a continuing review. And finally, if you need to close the study. So just about everything that you could need to interact with Huron is available here. The only thing we haven't yet developed is for multi-site research. And so that's why I'm indicating that if you ever find yourself in a multi-site research type of situation, contact us and we're happy to walk you through it. We'll have a Zoom with you and go through that. Does anyone have any questions at this point or comments? Anyone used this product and found it useful or have any suggestions on how to improve it? No. Okay. And then we have the Huron FAQ. I just want to point this out because a lot of questions that our investigators have are, if you come to the Huron FAQ, you'll be able to find those answers fairly quickly. The only person that can submit to the IRB is the PI. So if you fill out your IRB application, the only person initially that can submit is the PI. However, the PI can assign a PI proxy. And so if you have a graduate student that's really leading the way on that project, the PI can make them the PI proxy, and then they can submit afterwards without having to wait for you to do the submission. This is an important point. I think a lot of people have found themselves in a bad way about this, mostly because that submit button is only available in the PI's dashboard. Until they assign somebody a PI proxy, then the PI proxy will also find that submit button. So we get a lot of inquiries like, where's the submit button? I don't see it. Where is it? And so that's a question that is being addressed here. You can have assigned primary contacts. The only thing is, I think there's only one primary contact you can make. So we get a lot of questions related to who gets notifications if from the IRB, from our staff. And as best as I can gather, it's the PI proxy, and the PI and the contact. So those are the people that will get notifications.
Someone has a question. If I am collecting data at TAMU satellite campuses such as Round Rock,
Okay.
is that considered a multi-site?
No, so as long as we're the IRB of record, as long as we're the IRB for those sites, it's not considered multi-site. Let me think, like TAMU International would be multi-site because they have their own IRB. Prairie View would be another, Florida would be another one. So as long as we're the IRB, that's not considered multi-site. The other one that I just want to point out real quickly, some of you may have undergraduates working on your study, and you might have a hard time pulling them up in Huron. And there's a whole process of this ras.tamu.edu that they have to opt into their information being shared to Huron, and then they'll show up. Graduate students don't have that problem, faculty don't have that problem, but it's usually specific to undergrad students. And so make sure you are aware of this because it'll, you have to send them this link, they'll have to opt in, wait 24 hours, and then you should be able to find them to add them as study personnel. That seems to be a reoccurring issue. Okay, and everything else here, just take a look at it. You might find information that is important to you. The other thing that I just want to point out for my own purposes, because I've seen this a lot, make sure your consent document and your protocol are attached to Huron as Word documents. The reason they have to be Word documents is because that's how we're going to interact with you in many ways to let you know what changes need to be made. And so if you send it as a PDF, I'm not going to be able to write you the comments you need to see. Okay. Before I move on to Huron, is there any other questions? Because I'm sure a lot of you were just here to see a demo of the Huron product. But here, I just want you to know about the website because so many people will contact us about questions or not knowing how to find something, and it's all available on our website. And you know, we only work from 8 to 5, and so if you have questions after hours, you're gonna have to wait to get your answer. But we do have this website that has pretty much anything you'd need. Yes.
Question in the chat is for the Word documents, is that only for protocol and consent documents, or should all documents be Word documents?
The only ones we require are the Word and the consent and the protocol. We love getting Word documents because if there's any issues, we can type it in there. We like to make comments, we like to use track changes, but we understand that not everything can be a Word document, right? So not everything has to be a Word document. Yes.
An additional question, if undergraduates are working with us on an IRB, do they go through city training as well?
Yes, anyone that is study personnel on a protocol needs to go through the city training. Okay, so I am going to go to our website. This is actually the sandbox. This is not live. And I'm going to impersonate Corey. I think there's another question. No, okay, no, it showed up. Oh, okay. So I'm impersonating Corey. This is what his desktop would look like when he logs in, his dashboard. Here in my review is any pertinent information that you need to be made aware of. So he needs to do his disclosure profile for COI. Many of you might see this. Make sure you do your disclosure. One thing that our investigators, I think, are not clear on is that both the COI and the IRB are using Huron. So sometimes you'll get prompts from Huron, and it's not from our office, it's from the COI office. Additional compliance offices will be added as we go further. Aya Cook is going to be on here. IBC will be on here. And so you'll see different tabs for everyone that is involved. That initial My Inbox will prompt anything that needs an action from you. So what's there. If you're working on a protocol, if it's on your side, on the investigator side, you'll be able to see that protocol right there in your inbox. They also have this really nice thing, which I guess if you're not dealing with a lot of protocols, it's not that useful, but it'll show you any recent protocol you've been working on, and you can pin a protocol too. So for example, if there's one that you're constantly working on and making edits to, you can pin it. Like I'm just going to pin this entry, and in the pin tab, you'll always be able to come back to it and find it. So I guess you can't pin a disclosure. Yep. Nope, I guess you can't. It's not, but a protocol, IRB protocol, you can pin it and you can always come back to it. The other thing I want to point out is that it's kind of, the nice thing is that you'll be able to tell who your coordinator is. So a lot of times before, people have had a hard time identifying who's the person they're working with. And here you can always tell this is the person that will be helping you through the process. Yes.
A question in the chat, if we have an international collaborator, but the collaborator would only access anonymized data, does that person have to be included in the IRB and city training?
They don't have to complete city training, but I would add them because you want to make sure that it prompts us to do a expert control check. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have an issue with expert control because you're working with a country you're not supposed to. Is Lauren gonna come get? Yeah, so you'll be hearing from Lauren, who is lovely, and she will be telling you about how you don't want to get in trouble with their office. Okay, so I would recommend that you just let us know that this person will be receiving the identified data as part of this protocol. Give us their name, their institution, and then we'll route it to expert control. And that way you get that clearance that it's okay for you to work with that person and share data with that person, and you don't have issues. Many of you have probably seen on the news people getting in trouble for sharing information and data with external entities. So just something you want to safeguard against. Any other questions related to, I know our investigators have a lot of questions related to doing research with other countries. And most of the research that gets done in other countries is not anything all that troubling. Usually it's like a Zoom call or a survey, just very innocuous things. But every now and then we do see some things that raise an eyebrow, and we do like to make sure expert control lays eyes on it. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and create a study. So that way we, for sure, I can show you some other additional features of Huron here moving forward, but I just want to show you how to create your study. At this point, before you sit down to start your protocol in Huron, you want to make sure you have all your study documents together. That's your protocol. Your protocol should have already been developed. Your consent document should have already been developed. If you are using surveys, interviews, observations, using devices, make sure you get your device manuals. Anything that is related to data collection, you want to make sure you have it ready to go. Whenever I have a full group of people, I like to ask them what kind of research they do, so that way at least I have an idea if people usually do surveys or interviews, or if they're doing something a little more intricate like developing technologies. And I think this group does a lot. It's a big
College beds all across.
that's what I'm like, it's a big group. So anybody in attendance here could be doing a very big different, and apparently we have people from other departments visiting us, so it's even bigger as to what you are doing. But make sure you gather all the documents that are related to your research, because we are going to want to see that at the time of review. Okay, so you have all your documents ready to go. You would just go to create. So you select create new study, and hopefully it will get us there. The very first page is just your basic study information, and it's going to ask you some very basic information, like what's the title of the study? What's the short title of the study? Give us a brief description. And by brief, I really do mean like a paragraph. You don't have to go into super great detail. Is it a multi-site or a single-site study? If you ever think you have a collaborative study, this is a great time for you to pick up the phone and have a conversation with an IRB coordinator, because half the time it's not actually considered collaborative research. For example, if you are collecting research from high school students, we usually don't consider that collaborative research. That's more like single-site study, because we're the IRB of record and you're collecting at like, let's say, high schools. Collaborative and multi-site usually has to do with institutions working together and one of us deciding that an IRB will serve as the IRB of record. And that usually involves a further conversation to make sure that who is going to be the IRB of record for that project, which I covered earlier in the conversation. So usually the right answer is single site study. And then it'll ask who the IRB of record is. Usually, will an external IRB act as a IRB of record? And usually the answer is no. If you're thinking yes, once again, you might want to pick up the phone and have that conversation, because it's a decision of the IRB whether or not they want to seed review. It's not whether the investigator wants to seed review or not. There are federal regulations that govern whether or not we can. So make sure you have that conversation. And then it'll ask who oversees the study. So I know for sure none of you are working with dentistry, unless Corey raises his hands and says yes. It's usually TAMU College Station. That's the board you want to select. And this is where you have the opportunity to attach your protocol. So every single one of the questions on this page does have to be answered. That's why you see those red asterisks. And I am just going to write some nonsense so I can move us along. I hope that when you fill it out, you'll give us your actual information, but I just need to move us along. The other thing I want to point out is that whoever's filling out the information will default as the PI. So if you're a graduate student who's filling out this application, this is your opportunity to update it to your faculty member that's going to serve as a PI. And just as a reminder, graduate students cannot be PIs on an IRB protocol, so you want to find out who that faculty that will be your PI will be. And for this, I'm going to make myself the PI. And that's how you add your PI, and it'll update to that person. I'm going to say that yes, TAMU College Station, and then add. Once you select add, it'll, like anything else, take you to wherever you need to go to find that document. I am actually, it's in my USB drive. We have study documents, and here is the protocol. And you're just gonna, you can rename it if you want to. If you didn't like what the file was named and you want to save it as something else, you're welcome to. And you can select okay or not. It'll just keep the name of this document. And so that's your very first page. Once you've generated that very first page, you'll find that now you have a study number. Before this, there was no study number assigned. It's only once you have completed that first page that you get your study number associated with your submission. There are only, what is that? 6 pages that need to be filled out. And all of them are fairly simple to complete. We're just gonna move on to the very next one. Yes.
What should we fill under version number?
We don't, whatever helps you with documentation. You can start with 1, you can start with 2. It'll auto-generate one as well. So it's up to you if you would rather skip from 1 version to 2, 3, 4, or it'll do it for you. And if it does it for you, I believe it's like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It'll auto-generate for you. Okay. Then you have the next thing is your study funding source. If you have no funding associated with your protocol, all you have to select is the study has no funding and move on. If you do have funding, what will happen is that this Huron feeds into Maestro, and so you can look up any number. So you can just start typing M24, 0, let's see. Oh, actually, you don't even have to do this. You can just start typing and it'll start auto-populating. And so you'll get all the M numbers. And so you just keep going until you find yours, which apparently we're not that far into the year. And so you find yours, let's say this is mine, you click on it. And so all that information has now fed. And so that's how you find your M number. If you are at the proposal stage and you don't yet have a project number, what you want to tell us is project not set up in Maestro, and then you can provide us additional information in number 3, which is, hey, the funding agency has reached out to us. I am going to get this money, but it's not set up as a project, and you can write all that. But if it is a funded project, you want to make sure you give us a copy of the grant proposal and the award letter. And I think Corey has a question.
I think what's important here from a proposal versus a project perspective, which thank you for touching on that, is most proposals will not require an approved IRB to submit the proposal. When this really comes into play is once you are aware that you're going to be awarded and the work is going to begin. So as far as the timing on that, we do have investigators that will come to us and, well, I'm submitting this proposal and it talks about how I need IRB, and most of the time that is just that you need the ability to get an IRB. An IRB is at your institution is what they're looking for, not necessarily an approved protocol, when you won't really know if you're going to do the work unless you get funding. So I think it's important that timing is important to understand as far as submitting proposals versus starting projects.
Is that a resource you provide, Corey, like walking them through that part? Like, do you help with that?
Help with
investigators, like when they
our
submit?
office is in research development. So yes.
So you do-
Development. We will help with proposal development. If you have questions about those forms, when you get into it, SRS will also help in those,
Okay.
in that regard. But most of the time on proposals, we don't need to hold up a proposal submission waiting on an IRB approval,
Right.
because that's not the order of events. So if you have questions about any of those forms, when you go to submit to the NSF, NIH, anywhere like that, definitely utilize our office.
And sometimes it's for those investigators that are just lucky that they get funding on a project they already started. And so it's just a matter of doing a modification to add that funding source to an already approved IRB application, which is ideal. That's like the best case scenario, isn't it? You already have IRB approval, you just have to add that M number and the money flows through and it's great. Yes.
So then broadly speaking, would you recommend starting this process? So you submit a proposal, yay, you get a grant. Would you recommend starting this process as soon as you get the letter saying will be awarded this grant, or once like the money comes to the institution?
You want to start as early as you can. So one of the things that happens is that it's just the way it is. SRS will not release the money until there's a compliance check taken off, which means that you have an IRB proposal. So I highly encourage that you submit the IRB as quickly as you can once you know. Sometimes you don't have time, right? You get that letter and they're like, we need something tomorrow. So that's when you get that delayed onset determination. You can request it. Unfortunately, not every funding agency will take a delayed onset determination. So that's usually something investigators have to contend with. Is it?
Good point is agency dependent. So a lot of them will have just-in-time funding and like NSF will a lot of times request that you have IRB in place before they'll even send the money to the institution. So they do have processes that are like, I can go get like, hey, I'm gonna do this, but I'm not ready yet. You get that, and that usually satisfies that requirement. Not all of them are like that, not all agencies, so it kind of just depends. But most of the time it's like, you don't want to go through all this unless you're sure you're going to do the work. Right. I guess I am ready to begin. And I'm working with an investigator right now that's similar that just came here from another institution. So she has to get IRB approval here for them to transfer the funding, right? Her program officer will not hit the button until both, but she already had IRB approval at a past place, right? So that working, the problem is she's still very preliminary here in hiring staff, figuring out what, she doesn't really know what her full project is gonna be yet, because there's lots of moving parts. But she needs the funds to hire, so it's like chicken and egg, right? Like how does this work? And so you just have to write the protocol and you work with IRB and they'll help you like write that to get a approvable with the understanding that changes will be coming down the line, right? And so, but it can also be program officer specific. Some POs are easier to work with than others. There's just a lot of variables. But Denise is right. The earlier, the better.
The earlier the better. You'll save yourself a lot of trouble down the line. Just delays. Delays is the right word. You'll save yourself from having to encounter a lot of delays. So and if you've never submitted to us, that's a great way for you to get to know us as well. So if you've never submitted to our office, it's a great way for you to get to know your IRB coordinator, the process, the system. You can start with something simple, like just a survey, but it's a good practice to learn how to interact with our office. Yes?
A question online. I have a question about the timeline. I have a federal grant that will begin next February. The project will involve data collection in Germany. We need some time to develop and refine the instruments. If we submit the IRB by mid-November, would that give us sufficient time to obtain IRB approval by the end of January?
I can't answer that. So a lot of people ask us about datelines, and there's a lot of factors that go into play. Every protocol is different. The expertise of the person submitting, if you've never submitted to us, it's likely that it's a learning curve of how to interact with us. There's holidays. So you're talking about December. December is a time when people take holidays. And also what the protocol actually calls for. Then we're involving other offices. We're involved with other compliance offices like expert control. What the scope of your research is might also affect how long it takes. So what I do recommend is if you do know you have funding and you're expecting it, that you submit as quickly as you can so that you're not playing it too tight. So the sooner the better, I especially when it comes to funded research. I know it seems like a very daunting task and you want to put it off as much as you can, but you don't want to play those games because you're going to find yourself being like, I need this money. It's like my salary is how I pay my students, and you can't because that IRB approval might take longer than you expected. So I know that's not an ideal answer, but it is an honest one. And Corey used to work in our office, so he knows that this what I say is true. So yeah, make sure you submit as quickly as you can. Okay, so we're gonna continue to the next page. The next page will ask you who your local study team members are. This is where you add the PI and any other members of your team. If you are working with anybody that is external to A&M, there's a spreadsheet that we provide on the templates, and that's where you add that person for your external team member, and it will ask you information about them. The PowerPoint presentation that walks you through how to submit your very first application will also instruct you on how to add that. But for everyone else that is A&M related, you select add, and then you're able to find that person. So I'm gonna add Heather Klein from our office. There's Heather. She's going to be a research coordinator. There'll be questions as to whether she'll be involved in the consent process. Yes. And does she have a financial conflict of interest? I'm going to select no, she doesn't. Select okay. And then that entry is generated and you can add as many people as you need to.
When would I have a financial conflict of interest?
Well,
The answer's
usually-
probably no to that, like
99% of the time it is no. And it usually does have to involve funded research.
Okay.
So usually it has to be a funded opportunity. Or if there's any way that the person that is being added to the protocol would stand to benefit from the research
Financially.
financially, yes. There are sometimes conflict of commitment, which may also take into place. Those are a little more difficult to identify, but usually we identify them through the protocol and we route it to the conflict of interest office to make sure that everything's okay, or if there has to be a management plan in place before data collection might begin. Those take some time. Thankfully, they don't happen very often. We usually don't have those situations. So I'm going to just continue to the next page, and if anybody has questions, but I think we have like, what, 10 minutes? So I want to make sure I end through the application. The very next one has to do with whether you are using dietary supplements, approved drug or biologic, or unapproved drug or biologic, or if you're using a device. And the device in this case is not like a computer for a survey. It's not a recording device or a phone to do a survey. It has to do with more things to get like biological measures. So for example, if you're doing an MRI, that would be a yes. If you are using a smartwatch, that would be a yes. And so that's where you would give us an indication that you are using those things. And again, this department could say yes to either or. We do have research from this college that, yeah, TMS, that yes. Yes, there are a lot of devices and supplements that get used from this department. So at any given point, that could be a yes. And when you select yes for these, additional pages will populate. So if you let's say, I'm just going to select yes to device and no to a biologic. You select save. What will happen is that you'll get this additional page that is generated, and then you'll fill that out and tell us about that device that you are using in your research. I'm just going to move on to the very next page, which is where you tell us where the research is taking place. Select add. This drop-down menu does not work. So you do have to type in the location, which is something that you have to do in Iris. So it's not, shouldn't be too scary. You just let us know where you're doing the research. If it's on Qualtrics, a lot of people ask about that. Well, my survey is going to be on Qualtrics. You can just write that in, say online via Qualtrics, and we'll accept that. So I'm just going to do that right now. Okay, and it'll enter the information for you. You're going to go to the devices page because we selected yes for that, and it'll ask you to give us the name of the device and also to attach the manual. So this also does not work. The reason it does not work is the ones that were preloaded for Huron were more for medical or hospitals, and most of the research that gets done at A&M does not involve equipment that is used in a hospital, because we don't have a hospital, so we don't really do that type of research. So you can select EEG, which is a very common thing, and then you select add that device. You would put that manual, and then I'm just going to choose a file. So it's a random one. It's not a real one. I just want to get us through the application so you can see it. And you select OK, and that's where your device will show up, and then you'll have that attachment, which is, let's pretend, your device manual. You'll, for most of the things, you can just put that it's not applicable to the device exemptions. If one is required, we'll work with you to get it there. For the most part, it's not necessary, but you can just select that for now. Any additional files, so if you do have an IDE, which again, that may be a little bit outside of the scope of this presentation, and most of the research that gets done at A&M doesn't actually fall under that. And then it'll just ask you, will the study evaluate the safety or effectiveness of a device? Most of the research that gets done by this department does not do that. It's mostly just using a device to measure a physiological response like heart rate or blood pressure. So you can just select no to that. If you think it's yes, that's okay. You can select yes, and then when your coordinator receives it, they can have a conversation with you to see if we need to involve a little more of the FDA kind of worksheets to make sure that we're on the right page. Because sometimes investigators are developing a tool that is intended for to be marketed down the road, and it does involve the FDA. And if that's the case, then our office will work with you to get you down that path. And then the very last page has to do with uploading all your study documents. There's a section for you to upload your consent forms. There's one for your recruitment materials, and then for anything else. I'm just going to do it really quickly. So I'm going to select add, choose file. And if anybody has questions, this would be a great time while I'm attaching them. So you can see you have the recruitment materials. Just as you can see, I had a folder ready to go. So you can just, the Aggie Research Volunteer Form, which again, I'm plugging it in, and anybody is interested in using it to recruit participants. And then your survey instruments would go here. So choose file, survey instrument, open, and then there's a category. So you can actually say what it is. So survey questionnaire, okay. And then save. And that's pretty much the end of the application. It's fairly simple. It's basically just attaching documents that you hopefully already have in a file on your desktop ready to go. It'll say continue. And then it has this warning, which a lot of investigators overlook. When you select finish, it's not going to submit it. It's not going to ping anybody. It's just going to take you back to the workspace. So in this case, Corey's the one that put it together. If Corey doesn't do anything and just like leaves it there, the protocol will just sit there. Nothing will happen to it. It's in pre-submission, that's status, and it means that it is not moving anywhere. In order for him to get movement on this, he can add a comment like, hey, Denise, submit it. And it'll say to who? He says to the PI. So it's going to go to the PI. Okay. And so I, as the PI, will get pinged and I'll know that it's time to submit it. He can email the PI directly. For most of you grad students, that's probably the best way to get your PI to do it. Just, send them an email, say, hey, can you please submit it? And they'll be able to log in. I want to point out that the submit button is not available here for Corey, and the status is pre-submission. I am going to go as
You made yourself the PI earlier. Right.
So I'm gonna
I made you.
yeah. So I'm gonna switch users to myself. And I, as the PI now, will be able to see that protocol, which I believe is this one. And I will be able to see that comment that Corey sent me, and the submit button is available for me to actually go through and submit the protocol. As a PI, I would probably like to look at what was being put together before I submit it. So you can select edit study, and that'll give you the opportunity to go through it and make sure that everything looks right before you click that submit, because you want to make sure that they attached everything they were supposed to. So you can always do that. Select exit, and then as the PI, you select submit. And you say, yes, I confirm all these. And it'll go into the pre-review. Pre-review means that our office has received it. And during the pre-review process is where you work with an IRB coordinator to make sure your protocol is ready to go to the IRB reviewer. We often sometimes get emails from people going like, hey, can you look at these documents before I submit it? And one of the things we always tell them is like, when you submit it, you'll have an IRB coordinator working with you to make sure it's ready. And one of the nice things about Huron is that you can actually see that pre-review process in place. And you can say that, hey, that IRB coordinator has it, they're asking for changes. And then when they ask you for those changes, it'll go to clarifications requested, which means that you have to address them. Then you can have that back and forth until it's ready for IRB review. And then post-review, which means that anything the reviewer is asking for will be here. Sometimes they'll ask for something, sometimes they won't. Sometimes it'll just be like, this is great, ready to go, and it'll go to the review complete, and you get your letter saying that everything's good. If changes are required, then it'll come to modifications required, which is when they're asking you to make those changes, whatever needs to be made in order for the protocol to be approved. Okay. I think I'm on time. Is there anything else? Any other questions or?
Not right now.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I know compliance is not the most interesting topic, so I really appreciate your attention.
Okay, thank you, Denise. So we're at 11. If you have additional questions about IRB, there is irb@tamu.edu, correct? That's their general email. I also think that when you're in Huron, if you have a protocol that's in there, you should be able to see the coordinator that's been assigned. And so that's probably your best resource on any active IRB. We do kind of interact in the research development world with IRB as well, because we are developing protocols and grants. And we have a question?
Someone's got their hand up.
Yes.
Stephanie.
I have a question. How can we access the recording?
Of this?
Yeah.
We will be putting it on our website. We have like a YouTube type situation. It'll be probably by the end of the week. If not, it'll be early. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And we normally send out an email to attendees on the list that that's up. But we do kind of interact back to work. Thank you for that question. We do interact on the grant proposal side with IRB a little bit, but most of them obviously is on the back side where you're actually executing a project, whether it's funded or not funded. And so if you have questions, I did work in the office for a while over there.
Yeah.
She said this many times, and this is probably your best advice is reach out to that office, talk to a person, and it will be easier. And so, but anyways,
To reach out, do they?
IRB@tamu.edu is probably the best.
Yes. Or currently you can go to our IRB contact and pick up a name.
Yeah, you can go
Or
to the
not just by
website.
default.
Yeah.
So you can, there's a name you like and you're like, I want to contact that person, they'll answer your questions.
So use that resource. Okay, without any other questions,
Lot of things
So
in the chat.
thank you.
thank you for being nice. And we will see you when we see. If you have any issues with submitting grants or questions about submitting grants, please come to the REO office, College of Education, Human Development. We're there to assist. If not, have a good rest of your week, and we'll see if A&M can do well on the football field this weekend. You have to throw that in there, I think, right?
I
It's
think so.
required.
Not a good idea.